So hi everyone, my name is Dimitri. I'm one of the organizers here. Along with me, we have Bill, who is not able to join today, and we have David, who is joining us remotely. If you have any complaints about our session, if you have any feedback, you can give them to Bill, since he is the responsible one. So quick agenda for today, we have updates around Microsoft 365 since last time we met. We did take last month off, so we have 2 months worth of updates for you this time around. We have a sponsor that's here with us today. Then we'll go into the featured speaker, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A, some community chat events, a raffle, and then afterwards, we are going to meet up at a local place to grab a pint. So the last session that we had was harnessing the power of OpenAI inside of Power Virtual Agents with Matt Jimison. It was a great session to really give you a deep dive into how to set up a Power Virtual Agent. If you have not seen it or were here with us that day, check it on YouTube. It's a pretty good session and it's a pretty good pace. All right, so let's talk about some of the updates from last time. As you all know, there's probably about 50 to 100 updates per month. We try to boil it down to just a handful or so that are easily digestible and likely impact the audiences that we have here. So the first thing we want to talk about is a new search experience for Viva Connections. So this is if you're accessing your SharePoint intranet from within Microsoft Teams. And previously, the search experience was a little bit disjointed. So now if you're going to do a search, the first thing you'll notice at the top of Teams is that instead of saying search, it says search in the name of your intranet. So like in the screenshot, the intranet's called the landing. And if you take a close look at the top here above the people, it says search in the landing. So you're aware that you're not just searching all of your Teams chats and conversations, you're specifically looking for content that's on the intranet. Furthermore, as you start typing, it's going to give you an option to either search for your term within the intranet or search it within the rest of Microsoft Teams. So this again makes it just easier to kind of separate if you're looking for content versus if you're looking for Teams conversations and so forth. This is rolling out now and should be rolled out by the end of the month. So another update is that there's a new Microsoft Teams preview on Mac. So for those on the Windows side, Microsoft has released the preview version of Teams about 6 months ago, or maybe 4 months ago. And so far, it's awesome. That's what I'm actually using to present today. It's a lot faster. It still has a few bugs that we run into here and there, but overall, it's a much better experience than the old version of Teams. Microsoft has now brought the same new version to Mac OS as well. So if you're on a Mac, I would highly suggest checking it out. Another update is some new updates coming to Outlook for the web. As we all know, Microsoft typically pushes new Outlook functionality to the web version first, and over time, it makes its way into the full desktop client. So one of these new features is to have search refiners available within the Outlook web. So as you're doing a search for content, you're going to see across the top here, you can check in whether it has attachments, if it's unread, if it's to me, if you're mentioned, if you've previously flagged it or made it high importance. These are, of course, all keywords you could append into your normal search in Outlook today, but this just makes it a little bit easier to find what you're looking for. Another pretty large update is the change to the minimum iOS version that's being supported. So Apple is expected to release the latest version of iOS this month. If they haven't already, I don't have an iPhone, I'm not up to speed on that. But once they do, Microsoft is dropping support for the version that was free before that. So Microsoft supports the current version and 2 behind it. So if you have iOS 15, it's going to be dropped from support fairly soon. Doesn't mean things are going to break on day one. It just means they're not going to push new updates of their apps onto your devices. And then over time, functionality will stop breaking once Microsoft makes backend changes that aren't going to be reflected with your app. So long story short, if you have users that you're managing that have this, make sure you get them to upgrade to at least iOS 16. And then the last bullet here is around Intune. So if you are managing devices either through mobile device management or mobile application management, Intune is a little bit more generous and they kind of support one version more than just the Office team does. So at that point, you're going to need at least iOS 15. So they're going to be dropping support for 14. So if you have company managed devices, make sure no one is on 14. Another pretty interesting feature is part of it's like a subset of Intune called Windows Auto Patch. Just a quick show of hands, is anyone using Windows Auto Patch? So Windows Auto Patch allows you to push driver updates, to push other Windows updates to your end users. It also, in the near future, will allow you to push third-party updates, like updates to Adobe Acrobat, Adobe to Photoshop, pretty much any web application or desktop application can have patches managed through Microsoft. So very recently, Microsoft said, okay, instead of just pushing out Windows Update equivalent drivers, you might have custom drivers for equipment that you have or for other purposes. You can now upload your own firmwares and drivers and get that pushed out there to the servers. So this is more like a stepping stone as Microsoft starts to implement more and more broader support through this functionality. Next, Microsoft has released a new migration tool within the Admin Center that lets you migrate from Google Forms into Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms, interestingly, doesn't have any APIs, so you can't really build your own migration tool to do the same thing. But Microsoft found a way to do it on the back end, which is pretty cool. If you've worked with any clients moving from Google Forms into Microsoft Forms, traditionally, it was a pretty large manual effort to recreate all the fields, the questions, the conditional flows. Now there's a lot of this that will be automated, and this preview is rolling out right about now. So that all being said, I'd like to give a huge thanks to our sponsor for today's session, which is LMS 365. And with LMS 365, we have Rich that's going to come up and present a little bit about who they are and what they do. Rich.
Thank you, Dimitri. Hello, everyone. Real quick. Sorry for the folks that are on the phone. I did have some swag, some really cool socks, but you're not going to be able to get those. Plus, I'm paying for drinks. So this is an exciting day for me, right? So a little bit about us. Learning management space is really a very crowded space. There's a lot of them, really big players, really small players. The key feature and the difference for us is we're the only ones that's actually built into the Microsoft platform. There's no other LMS in the market that is built completely in the Microsoft platform. So we are only cloud-based learning, again, built into Microsoft 365. Probably you might have heard of us. I know Mike has. We've been around for a number of years. We have millions of users in 60 plus countries. So we've been doing this for a long time. Comprehensive learning solution checks all the boxes about what a learning system is supposed to do. Seamless integration, not another application, not another tab. Mobile learning app, of course. Easy install, quick win for IT. Literally installs in 10 minutes. And we are content agnostic, so whatever content you want to use, whatever supplier you want to use, and we really make IT's life simpler when it comes to this thing. And all the boxes are checked from a Microsoft standpoint, so you can buy it in the Azure Marketplace, Viva Learning integration, Power BI in the back end for all reports, LinkedIn Learning, Go One, all that content. We have a freemium version as well that you can download from the App Store in 10 minutes. And then we're also in the Azure OpenAI program to do some real cool stuff that's coming out in a few weeks. Since it's kind of a visual product, I just want to show you what it looks like. So this is in SharePoint Online, either as web parts or also in collections and teams. That's some of your courses. We have learning dashboards. We have course catalogs. We have gamification. We have all the things that you think of as an LMS system. Something that it looks like, here's a course description, some of the course content and how it looks within inside SharePoint Online. It's the same look and feel in Teams as well. So it's a native Teams app. But the look and feel is exactly the same and how it works, which is pretty cool. And then also Viva Learning. So if you think of Viva Learning as a great place to aggregate content, we can actually turn Viva Learning into a full-on LMS. And that's kind of our pitch when it comes to Viva Learning. And then a lot of tracking in Power BI. This is just one example of some of the reports. I think we come with, I don't know, maybe 30 reports out of the box from the dashboard's perspective. This is me. We've got a little 10-minute demo on YouTube. We got some AI coming out, and then we have a great trust center following all the checks and boxes of what Microsoft wants us to do and how you build an application with them. That's it.
All right, thanks, Rich. Yeah, and we're also, as Turn Digital, we are partnered with LMS 365. We've delivered this to a number of our clients. It's actually a great tool. I would highly recommend it if you're looking at it.
And I do apologize for not saying that. Thank you. And if you get in touch with Dimitri, get in touch with me, everything will go through Turn Digital.
Then we want to quickly shout out to our platinum sponsor, which is the company I work for. They help us in months that we don't have session sponsors. So that all being said, we want to bring you to the main event today, which is Understanding Decision Fatigue, User Experience, and SharePoint, presented by Rachel. So Rachel, come on up.
So thank you all for coming today to my presentation on decision fatigue and user design. This is a preview of a speech I'm going to be giving next month at Collab Days New England. That's going to be here exactly 1 month from today. For those who don't know me, my name is Rachel Spaneth, and I've been a member of this user group for 5 or 6 years now. First of all, I'd like to let everybody know I am not an IT person at all, and I never have been, but I've been IT adjacent throughout my entire career. I grew up in Colorado, and after college, I moved out to Massachusetts for a tech sales job. At the time, I didn't even know what a server was, but then I spent the next 10 years doing that, working with IT directors, learning about the business, and was able to shift over to project management role, where my first project was rolling SharePoint out as our company's intranet. At the time, I knew Microsoft made SharePoint, but that was about it. And so I've really just learned as I went and grown through all these community events to really just grow my understanding. And luckily, I've never been alone. I've always had IT counterparts to handle all that techie stuff for me to deal with. So myself and my team, we can focus on the business requirements, the kind of change management, the user experience, and that kind of a thing. Now, I am an intranet solution architect at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And my focus is really on user experience and helping our more than 100,000 global employees connect to the information that they need so that they can continue to make the world a healthier, cleaner, and safer place. In my spare time, I like to travel and go to concerts with my spouse, Sam, hang out at home while I knit and crochet with my cat, Romeo, and I also entertain others on the weekend as a member of the Boston Murder Mystery Company. So it's a killer time. So SharePoint is not a baseball movie that is set in Iowa. Simply building out sites, creating lists, and uploading documents doesn't guarantee that anybody is going to use it or even know where to begin. Often, the people who are involved in building and designing these sites are not the ones who are really using it every day, which means that we might end up building something that makes complete sense and totally meets all of the requirements. But when it's confusing or unclear for the people we expect to use it, it just leads to more time that we spend training, slower adoption, and an overall general negative sentiment. I know that's a whole lot, but the good news is we don't have to do any of this alone. We will be gathering our dream team. But before we do that, I'm going to just take a step back and we're going to talk about a broader concept that impacts user experience, decision fatigue. So decision fatigue is one of my jams. And once I was aware of it, I started to see it everywhere. I'd heard about elements of it, and I'm sure all of you will recognize different pieces from this presentation. But once I started to put them all together, I saw how it was impacting my everyday life. And then I learned some life hacks to fight it for myself, and also ways that I can help design and develop things to make it easier for others. It's also really helped me to partner with business users to find ways to combine their awareness with Microsoft tools to design something that's adaptable and relevant for all the different types of users who use it. And we're going to walk through that journey, wrap up with some real life examples that my teams come up with, and then we'll have questions throughout. So decision fatigue refers to the phenomenon where a person's ability to make good decisions declines after making a series of decisions over time. And that makes sense, but I mean, how many decisions do we actually make in a given day? Any ideas?
Thousands.
You're right. We make about 35,000 decisions every day. 95% of those are what we would call autonomous decisions. It's like, am I looking left? Am I looking right? Am I reading this email or not? What am I clicking on next? So a lot of those just act or delay moving decisions that we have to make to get from one moment to the next. And about 5% of those are what we would call active decisions, the things you really have to spend that time and energy to make a decision about. But each decision drains the battery, whether it's small or large, active or autonomous. And the more choices you make, the harder the next one becomes. And the more complicated the choices, the more it's going to drain your battery. So at the start of the day, we have our full battery, and then we start thinking about what we're going to wear and eat, get to work, start filling out forms, reply to email, make some business decisions. Then we have to manage our social and family plans. And at the end of the day, you just got to wonder, I mean, how long have I been scrolling? I mean, when our decision battery is drained, simple decisions like what should we watch, what should we eat become really, really difficult. And not only is it difficult to make a choice of what to watch at the end of the day, but Netflix and other streaming platforms are prime examples of the paradox of choice with their endless scrolling. The paradox of choice boils down to this: the more options that we're given, the less satisfied we are with whatever we choose, and by extension, what we're not choosing. There's this commonly cited paper in psychology that talks about this magical number 7 plus or minus 2. But the gist of it is that lists with a lot of choices become significantly harder to remember and process at the same time. And there is no real magic number. It is important to be mindful of the number of choices and options that we're providing. Long lists mean that you're less likely to remember everything, so you have to make the decision to go back up and reread everything. We might need to review those choices more than once to try to select it, and then second guess that choice once we've made it. That means it's draining our battery even faster and leaving us feeling less confident in our choices and decisions. And when our decision battery is drained, rest is the only way to refresh it. When we're pushed to make a decision, it doesn't lead to great results. Here are some examples of the effects of decision fatigue as it applies to my Netflix habits. We can start making impulsive decisions, like I made an error and signed into the wrong profile. I start making biased decisions just by picking the prettiest picture tile that I see. I start to shut down mentally, which means I don't even want to make a decision, so I turn off the TV. That's not happening. I will probably just avoid making a decision and keep on scrolling to see what new categories they might have come up with. And eventually I'll probably just stick with the status quo and jump back into Seinfeld again. And all of this leads to increased stress and burnout, which means that we regret and second guess those decisions. I can't even enjoy it because I'm wondering, should I be watching Is It Cake? So what can we do about decision fatigue? You can start out with defining standard processes and creating routines. A defined path means that there are fewer decisions. You can create SOPs when you're standardizing and documenting these processes. Whether it's at home or at work, you can break these large and complex problems into smaller, more manageable steps that follow a defined path. Now, people can follow a list of steps instead of making a decision at each point. This makes it easier to get consistent results consistently. And you can always refer back to that SOP document to remember the next step or decision so you don't have to try and find that one yourself. Also, create a routine for yourself. You don't have to follow Steve Jobs' lead and wear the exact same thing every day, but find what works for you. Routines allow us to make fewer decisions, which means we're not using as much of our mental energy to do this. The goal is to remove those common decisions you make on a regular or not so regular basis. For example, in my personal life, I would find that at the end of the day, I would come home and just toss my keys in my bag somewhere, wherever it made sense at the time when my decision battery was drained. Didn't make good choices. And then the next day when I needed to leave, I would spend 20 minutes running around desperately trying to find them. So what did we do? Really simple. Got a key rack by the door and a coat rack. They're both by the door. As soon as I would walk in, put them there. Didn't lose my keys since, until we repainted and had to take the key ring down. Oh, that was a rough 2 weeks, but it really can help. Now, speaking of creating processes and routines, create one for making decisions. Reacting and responding in the moment might feel like you're being more productive, but each one of those steps is a new decision. So to save your own decision battery, plan out your day. Start with identifying and organizing your decisions. I love Microsoft To Do for this. I can pull in things from flagged emails, planner tasks, and a bunch of stuff I add in to do myself. I even started creating recurring tasks like weekly personal development, bi-weekly Viva Engage posts, weekly laundry. It really helps to keep those routines set up so I don't have to make a decision. And then I start adding in other tasks with due dates. And so that allows me to plan when I can get things done. When I use To Do with my Outlook calendar, I can block off the time to make sure I'm able to set those deadlines and commitments that I will actually be able to meet. And then from there, once you've organized and prioritized, make your most important decisions first before your battery is depleted. At the beginning of the day, after a break, after lunch, when you have a little bit more of a fresh mind, that's when you're really able to tackle those tough decisions and make the best decisions possible. In To Do, I will go through and I'll start grouping different things together that all might be related. I'll make sure I set those or I put those decisions in the order that I think that they most make sense. And so I can just work through my list without really having to stop and use that decision battery to think about what am I doing next. And then once you've done that, you can really hit the gas and start to automate. You can create workflows and approvals and get notified and alerted when you need to take action so you don't have to check on things manually. And when all these decisions and approvals are already defined and automated, you can just focus on making the decisions you need to make and move on. But the secret is don't try to automate before you have fully identified that entire process, or you will find some very interesting gaps. Maybe you'll send 1,500 emails to your IT help desk in the span of 1 minute. Maybe you won't. And then once you've done that, really try to understand your audience. Use the language that they understand. It's not just English. Remove jargon, technical words, define acronyms. Keep it focused on the outcome or the goal of that message. Pictures and screenshots can be really, really helpful. And you want to try to simplify that experience by breaking content up into digestible sections, linking out to give context without creating additional clutter. And then really the goal is to simplify the decisions and the cognitive load. For example, in forms, you can group questions in a logical order. Remove the questions that aren't needed. As a side note, I am so angry whenever I shop online and they make me enter my billing and my shipping address separately when they're the same. I get aggravated when I have to enter my street address, city, state, and zip code. You should be able to get 3 of those from just my zip code. I shouldn't have to enter it. Why am I filling out this form? It drives me bananas. So yes, don't ask people to fill in the information that you can already figure out or you already know, because they're going to lose their esteem filling it out and start spending their time thinking about data that's already available instead of the information we need them to provide us. And then be consistent. Reuse your formats, images, layouts, icons. I mean, the more similar things appear, the less effort it takes to process that information. And that consistency also helps us as developers and creators because we don't have to make as many decisions of how to put it together. We can follow that template. So now that we understand that general idea of decision fatigue, it's really like, how do we connect that with that user experience and what we build within the Microsoft platform? So this is one of my favorite images of user experience and design. Are the people who've created this horrible path through the grass, are they lazy, rude, or did they just find a way to simplify their day and make fewer decisions? I mean, this can be the case with Microsoft products and SharePoint and everything we build. We have designed something that is so beautiful and so functional. And look at how straight these lines are. These bricks are perfect. But if it feels like it's more work to use, people are going to find their other ways. You can't assume that everybody's going to have the same needs or is going to use the product the same way. So especially since we all know a whole lot more about what this product can do and all the technology that's available, we can be a little bit biased and might accidentally fall into the trap of designing for ourselves. In these situations, in the situations where you have to build it a certain way, that is required. We can't allow a cut through. You can utilize some additional tools like messages from leadership to provide keep off of the grass signs, to help guide people. Even though it's a little bit more work, it helps to guide people the right way so that they can, maybe not destroy the grass that we planted. Alternately, this is another way to think about how we build and design things, regardless of whatever the tool or the platform is. A lot of the time we get so focused on building the pyramid from the bottom up, and we want to fill up all of those functional needs first. But that, again, can create an echo chamber for designers. And then when you share it and then they come back and there's something that has to completely rework the entire functional layer, it's so frustrating. And it's really not a great experience. The nice thing is with the Microsoft tools, everything being in the cloud, it really allows you to take more of an agile approach and build up the pyramid. So you can hit a little bit of all of it to make sure that what you're building and developing is going to have that user adoption and acceptance. And also, when there's massive major changes, doing it incrementally can really, really help with that training load and kind of overwhelming experience for the employee. So this is a whole lot of work. And like I said at the beginning, we cannot do it alone. So we got to find our dream team. We have to partner with our business users. No one person or project team or IT group is going to have all of the answers. And it's really a good idea to invest that time up front to understand those users, who they are, what information they're accessing, what are they doing in this process. Where are they coming from and where are they going next? How familiar are they with what they're doing with this process? How often are they coming here? Now, you don't need to keep these people involved throughout the entire process. It's more about interviewing them throughout to make sure you really understand those user goals so you can focus on building something to meet those specific needs while also building out the bigger solution with everything else. So spending this time is gonna pay off in the long run because you're gonna end up building something that's a lot more user-friendly. And when you deploy it, you're gonna have a whole lot of people that are there as evangelists because they were involved and interviewed and included, so they have a stake in it. By involving the business and using the Microsoft 365 tools, you also have the opportunity of transitioning ownership and responsibility to the business. These Microsoft 365 tools have a very low barrier of entry, but a high ceiling of mastery. So it can really be something that you can set the business up to maintain and keep things running without having to engage you for every small little change. And it's definitely not a set it and forget it sort of a situation. We all know that technology and business, everything changes over time. So that is another reason why it's important to include the ownership of the business so that they can take on that responsibility of reviewing content, making sure everything is staying up to date, and reaching out when there needs to be some sort of a tweak or change or other types of adjustments they don't feel comfortable making. And once you've identified that audience and their needs, you can more easily design with the end user in mind. But I first like to think when you have those end users and you know what you're trying to do, coming at it from a content-centric approach, trying to think about what information, documents, forms, what are they trying to do so we can pull this all into a page to really provide context and guidance to give people the direction to provide the information that we need them to provide and to connect them with the information that they need to continue. And, so it's also important to avoid those quicksand traps that people fall into. Anticipating those user needs and interactions can help you to prevent or help you to create something that's a lot more effortless that prevents people from making mistakes. If you know that, specifically, you need to have like a cost center be a specific, character length, you can build in validation to make sure people aren't submitting something with incorrect information that just requires at least another cycle or 5 to get what you actually need. And that just builds even more frustration. And then really, you want to try and simplify it as much as you can. And that also helps with being consistent. You keep it simple, you keep it consistent so people can focus on the information and continue moving on. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at some of the examples that my team has created using some of these tools to help with some of these challenges. We're going to start with the tools that have the lowest barrier for entry, but they all have a very, very high ceiling of mastery when you include Power Platform. So forms are a beautiful entry point. They're something that the business user can create themselves. They can write it however they want, put however. They have full control and they can really develop what they want within a Microsoft form. We can definitely help with building out a form that is more intuitive for sure, but it's very simple for them to jump in. You can reduce decisions by using branching, only ask and you can also add in links and other resources to guide people to provide the right information. Now, there are limits to forms. There's limited question types. There's no validation beyond required questions. So if those are some issues, you might need to look at one of the other options we talk about next. But here is an example of one of the things we've created. We've taken a form that's involved in a process and we've added it into a page. This allows us to add additional context, instructions, links, and images to put everything together and organize it for our audience. We start out with a self-service path. At our company, anybody in the entire company can create a SharePoint site if they want to. They just got to fill out a form. A lot of times people come to the SharePoint team because they want to create a site. So we start out at the very top. You want to do this? Take this route. It gets you directly to your end goal. No other steps required. Then we have a message and it's the why for our audience. And then we've embedded that form directly on the page. So if you don't make anybody do an extra click, go to another spot, they can see those instructions and fill out the form. And we've used branching to make sure that the answers that they're providing give us the additional context that we need. Our team handles a variety of different types of SharePoint projects. And if they're dealing with a classic site or a modern site, we want to ask different questions. So we've created that branching. We did that in forms because we wanted to make it very simple for everybody in our company to fill it out without having to worry about the permissions of what happens with that form once they submit it, because that turns into a project request. And when our team manages projects, we don't necessarily want everybody seeing everything behind the magic curtain. So, like I said, this page is created for our end user colleagues in mind, but we will talk about what we did for our team next, which is Microsoft lists. Microsoft lists are a great step up from forms because they start adding in a lot of different column types. You can have validation, you can use calculated columns, automatic population, a whole lot of different options. And once you've created your list, you can apply some simple and more complex customization to that standard list form to control the layout, formatting, and columns that appear. But there are some downsides. The permissions do get a little trickier when you start playing around in Microsoft lists, especially if you want to limit what people can do after they add in a new item. And while there are some really, really cool things we can do with formatting, the fancier steps require JSON code, which is very easy to edit and very easy to break. And there is no undo button if you accidentally put a character in the middle of your JSON code and you don't know what you did. So that can be a bit of a pitfall to keep in mind. And for the time being, you're limited to the one list form for a list for new, read, and edit. But that is going to be changing sometime soon. I think in January-ish, there will be some new list forms coming. So, like I said, our team we created a flow that took that Microsoft form and pops it over into a SharePoint list. And then we added in some of those extra columns we need to do our project management. I'm not going to zoom in. This is a lot of fields and this is really ugly. How in the world are we ever supposed to do this? So we used a little bit of just some list form formatting and created something here. So we've created groupings. So we have the forms, the project details are at the top. So we probably aren't going to overwrite them or type over those fields by accident. And then we have all of our project notes at the bottom. So that's where we can maintain things. We also have conditionally shown fields. Like I said with our form, we buried those questions. We don't want to show a bunch of empty fields in our form. So we hide them based on other selections. And we even added a little shortcut at the bottom so we can jump into that flow if we ever wanted to see what those flow details looked like. Now, list formatting isn't just for those that list view. You can also apply it to list forms. You can apply it to columns and views to take information out of that not so pretty grid into something that's a little bit more user friendly. There's some formatting that's available using built-in design mode, but the sky is the limit with advanced mode. Now, this has the same risks as those list forms, but depending on how much you do, that JSON code can start to get really complicated. But luckily, you don't have to learn what JSON code is at all. Not really. There's a lot of really amazing resources. I am obsessed with the list formatting samples site. I have lost so many hours just clicking and looking at all these different ideas to get inspired. And then I did learn some very basic JSON formatting and kind of structure basics so I could figure out kind of how the pieces of the puzzle came together. But once I understood kind of the inspiration and the puzzle blocks, I just used my good friend Bing Chat to just tell me how to do things differently. So, I was just say like, hey, how can I make this icon bigger and put in the code? And then I would paste it. And most of the time it did it. Sometimes it didn't. I'd be like, that didn't work. And it would give me something else. And it worked perfectly. So it's really not too shabby when it comes to trying to modify some of this to get you what you really want. So for our team posts these weekly tips on Viva Engage for how to use SharePoint and all the other Microsoft tools, like our tips and tricks. And we realized a couple of months ago, we had over 100 posts. But it was kind of hard to find those previous posts. Our community is one of the most active in the company, and even using topics, if you're trying to find something that's more than a few weeks old, you're doing a lot of scrolling. And we talked about that. We don't like the endless scroll when it comes to decision fatigue. And to top it off, our team spends a lot of time working on these posts and developing them and building them out. And we were noticing we were getting questions on the stuff we'd already answered. And so we wanted to make something that was a little bit more evergreen than our Viva Engage community. So just a little bit of background, our team kind of has a content management list where we have ideas of future things that we know are coming or other suggestions we've had. So it's our future content list has all of our drafts, our notes, feedback, all that kind of stuff. We didn't really want to expose that ugly back room to everybody else. We wanted to have a nice display. So we used a little bit of Power Automate magic and we made a list that is just our published tips and tricks. We added some topics, made it all here, but still just isn't quite doing it for me. So we combined some of those tools that I talked about earlier and we made a nice little page. Created two lists. One list is a lookup list of those topics with those icons. So you have a definition of what those are. You click on one of these little icons and it filters over to show you some of these different tips, all shown in alphabetical order. And it shows you what some of the other topics it might be talking about. And you click on it, it opens it up into a whole new window. And it kind of just looks a whole lot nicer. And people have had a lot of fun browsing through to discover things on certain topics. Some of our newer site managers are really enjoying kind of having that kind of like discovery into some different tips that are out there. And then, if the list forms, the columns, views, those aren't working for you, you can always go to our good friend Power Apps where you have full customization and control. You can have one list with multiple views. You can have 20 lists with a single name. You can do a whole lot of stuff. You can mix and match, pull it all together, and it gives you full control. But with great power does come great responsibility and technical debt. So it is important. The more these Power Apps are developed, you have good documentation. You have cross-training. You have people who know how to handle this so you don't end up in a situation where business critical resources are at a standstill because nobody knows how to update this field anymore. So here's a Power App we've created. So my team is a weird team. There's my group of, there's like 3 of us that are on the SharePoint side. Then there's 2 people who are on the like email and video side. But everybody at the company thinks of us all as one team. And we had kind of our own separate different places for all of our project requests. And so we actually created a simpler Power App for our email and video team. But when we created this landing page, we wanted to make sure that, hey, if you came here for those like SharePoint requests, you still have a button to get there. It takes you to a different spot, but at least we're trying to keep that consistent approach. So we know people might be coming at it from different angles. We want to make sure we're providing as many pathways as we can. Now, so like I said, we link out to the 3 different types of projects. We also include a, kind of guidelines. Before you do anything, make sure you know this information before you even start. Oh, and then our 3 projects. And then we have our 2 separate forms that are connected to one list because, like I said, those 2 people manage both of those projects and they mix and match. So we've created 2 separate user forms to provide the information that we need, where we're using things like, the text guidance. We also have some validation built in. And as you can see, there is not a question asking what their name is because we know who they are because it's Power Apps. And we don't ask them anything about like their department or reporting organization or any of that because we can get that all through a Power Automate flow that runs in the background and fills out all of that demographic information that we know is available through their profile. Oh, and there's also a little button here at the very bottom of that homepage to be able to see your own project requests. For email and video, we don't really provide visibility to our SharePoint projects because it's a little bit different. Yeah. So in summary, when we reduce the decisions and complexity of decisions, we really allow users to focus their mental energy on the things that require that extra thought and effort. And when we combine that with we're making changes and we want to really reinforce changes, we can really leverage all of these different tools to reinforce and guide those change behaviors. And when we put this in practice, we reduce the decisions that we have to make as creators, developers, or communicators, and we create repeatable processes that allow us to focus on all of our mental energy on the things that are really different and require that extra thought. Any questions?
So just so I understand your role and what's happening here in your organization. So the team that you work for, essentially what it is your team like a gateway to help your business users to use Microsoft tools?
Yes, we
so
help
you're still supporting them in the back end too. You're not just sort of getting them where they need to be and they're on their own and you're coaching them how to use the tools, but you are.
They reach out to us we will coach if asked, but we are a team of 3 in a company of over 100,000. So we have to really kind of pick and choose our battles, but that's why we have our project requests. There are a lot of repeat customers that will have us come in and start working on other things. A lot of people, they just
have empowered to use Microsoft in the way that, Power Platform in the way that's going to work for whatever their needs are, but they will potentially reach out to get guidance or project support potentially. But the goal is really have them be self-sufficient.
Yes, the goal is, that they.
So for these things that you've developed, like the form for, which team are you trying to get to? Like, how do you socialize these things in a global organization like that? Like, so that because something that I deal with, I get the same effing question, even though I've built like virtual chatbots and I'm like, guys, like, I don't even want to answer your questions anymore. Like, there are tools and there's how do you get them to self-sufficiency instead of constantly just emailing you directly? Is that even possible? I don't know.
I do not have children, but I imagine parents here have had a similar challenge with children trying to get them to do what you want them to do. It's just repeating it a lot. And the really, really, really big piece is when that reinforcement comes from above. When you have leadership buy-in and communication, that is the magic that works. And secondly, getting a couple of, I like to call them evangelists or, lackeys that I'm bribing to, just be my street representation. No, it's really just trying to find those people who really get it and involving them a little bit in that process in the right situations can really help them be the kind of the fuel to push things along. But it is hard. Trust me. There are so many things that I do that make me feel like I'm just pushing a boulder up an endless hill. Oh boy. Yeah. Like I said, everybody in our company can create a site. We have a lot of content management issues.
I would also add to that. I mean, everything that Rachel said, absolutely. The other thing that I've done in those situations is instead of answering the question directly, I'll always just send a link.
Point to, I've definitely done that. They're like, it's right here for you.
And if I get that a lot, I'll even go so far as to create an Outlook signature file that has the instructions with the link in it. Just go boom.
I have an auto reply on.
Reply.
I have an auto reply on Teams that says, do you need help with iConnect? Check out this training page. That has a Power App that has 250 plus links of all sorts of the very specific, you can do keyword searches for that kind of stuff. So it's really you just gotta you feel like you keep saying it. And I have so many quick replies. I'll pop it out, boom, there you go. Awesome. I have probably 20 different ones where I'm like, the answer to your question is this.
We have a question online from Steve. Steve, if you want.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for presenting today. I think this is a very important topic to discuss. So thank you. That being said, I think some of the things you pointed out in the beginning were very important. Like someone like myself, I've been pretty new to SharePoint. This is, a little more than a year that I've been actually, working with it in a company perspective. When I was 16, I was obsessed with learning how to play the keyboards and how to write music. So I started composing music. Went to university and took music theory as a minor and had an awesome professor who gave me the advice that if you're going to break the rules, make sure you learn them first. When I left university, I had all this information, all these tools, and I just made the worst music you could possibly think of because I had too much going on at the same time. And this is a great lesson. It's something I'm very cognizant of when I'm making SharePoint pages and other things, that I'm not using everything I've learned. I'm using it tactfully. And as I've, many years in creating music, I've learned that minimalism is very important. It could be a very complicated piece to build it, but from the listener's aspect, they hear it and they go, oh yeah, that's pretty simple. I like it. Makes sense. And that's kind of like what we have to do when designing forms or designing SharePoint sites. The user has to, like you said, connect with it. If they don't connect with it, then you're not going to succeed at what you were trying to accomplish with it. So I think everything was great, what you presented today. So thank you.
I give that feedback a lot with our site managers when we're telling them how to put pages together, because they just start scrolling through all the web parts. I'm like, no. Don't write a novel by looking every word up in the dictionary.
Sure.
Think about that content focus of like, what do I really need to show here? And so many people, God bless them, they love their hero web parts with placeholder, coming soon. Don't ever put a coming soon button anywhere, because because you don't know what anybody's definition of soon is. I might think that soon is next week, and I come back and I'm like, oh, it still says coming soon. Nothing on this site is valid. I've quit. And I jump out. Instead, you add that button when you have it and you're like, hey, we have new information. Come back and pull people back in. That's how you can kind of slowly build that habit. And that also allows you to kind of like, hey, you know what? We have this idea of we want to have this page that literally gives you everything you need that you could ever want to do. One page just right here. And it's like, okay, well, that's a lot. I don't even know where to start. So start with one space and really try and refine the spot that is like the thing that's manageable, the place where you have the buy-in and the people who are involved, where you can just kind of test it out, see how it goes, see what works, see what doesn't, and start to build. And maybe you start building out these pages and you're like, okay, cool, I love the keep it simple approach. You start, okay, let's just add our things, add stuff, and then all of a sudden our simple isn't so simple anymore, at which point, okay, let's just look at this again and figure out maybe we need to split this into two pieces and break it up to make sure we're keeping people engaged, but also not overwhelming them with so much that they have information overload.
I agree completely. I mean, it's fascinating because everybody has a different visual aesthetic, what they like, what they don't like. And sometimes I find bringing in other people, hey, can you review this, what I just did? What do you think? Does it work? Does it look good? It's good to get feedback from many sometimes, just so you're not like just, promoting your own aesthetic to people. You want it to fit what the client or customer wants, not just what you think the visual should look like. So yeah, it's important to communicate.
Any other questions?
No.
I just want to say, fantastic presentation. This is so helpful. Will you be sharing your slides at all?
I absolutely will share it in the chat. I have it's just the whole fun thing. I'm like, I don't want to have to hit the stop sharing and see what shows up here. So yes, I will be putting those in the chat, and they have links out to any of the sources that I referenced in there. So
thank you. Thanks, Rachel.
I will just.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so we have some closing slides that we'll look at in just a moment here. So first thing is I just want to thank, actually we'll come back to that back in a minute. But in terms of upcoming sessions, we do have next month, we're going to learn a little bit about getting started with the AI builder. That's going to be with Ashish Bhatia, who actually just came down for a few minutes. He actually works in this building at Microsoft. So there'll be a good deep dive in terms of what this is, how it works, and some demos for how you could take advantage of that in your environment. We do have a call for speakers open for November. If you are interested, click on this link or come talk to one of us. This is Rachel's first time presenting, and she did a phenomenal job. So definitely shy. We're going to take December off for a holiday break. The third Thursday happens to be a few days before Christmas, and we kind of realized that people have a lot of other priorities at that time of year. And then we'll pick back up in January back at this location. So if you'd like to scan a QR code, this is the one to submit your session. All right, so moving forward, in terms of upcoming community events, there's going to be the Power Platform Conference in Las Vegas the first week of October. This is an in-person paid event. Is anyone going? All right, I'll be there. I'll make sure to share my findings when I'm back afterwards. Then we have Collab Days here in this actual location. It's going to be a free event on Saturday, the 21st of October. Registration is open. If you have not yet registered, please do so. The more advanced you register, the better they can plan for food and everything else that's required.
What exactly is Collab Days?
The Collab Days is like the former SharePoint Saturday. So essentially, you're going to have about 6 or 7 sessions happening in parallel in each of these conference rooms, each on a different topic. Each session is going to be about 70 minutes, give or take. So you got to choose your own path based on whatever you're most interested in.
Okay.
And then there's going to be probably about 6 or 7 sponsors as well, doing raffles and giveaways and just showing what they do. EduCon or 365 EduCon. So I recently learned this was the rebranded version of SP Fest, which was the big competitor to SP TechCon. So it's not an education conference like for the education industry. It's actually a Microsoft 365 conference. So if you're in Chicago, it's also a paid in-person event. And then Microsoft Ignite has been announced both in person and online. Online is going to be completely free. Registration is open now. In person, there is a registration fee, and I believe it's going to be in Seattle. They just announced the in-person registration this week. Is anyone planning to go to any of these other conferences?
Next week or next month.
Collab Days. Sounds good. All right. Are we missing anything? Are there any other events coming up in the next few months that anyone would like to mention? All right, we're going to keep rolling. So besides our in-person groups that we have here, there's also a number of things that are online. If you go to pnp.github.io, you'll get a full list of ongoing community events. And a lot of these dive a little bit deeper within specific technologies. Some of these are more focused based on like the Champions Call, which is more, business champions of the technology as opposed to more technical. But a lot of great things. There's nonstop information for things that are out there if you're interested in learning more. So besides us here being the Office 365 user group, there's also a number of other user groups that are here in the New England area. Some meet more frequently than others, so definitely check them out before you commit to going to one. But that being said, there's a lot more going on beyond us. All right, so we'll open this up now in terms of a community chat. Is anyone running into any problems within their Microsoft 365 environments or projects? Or on the flip side, has anyone solved something that was pretty complicated and you'd like to share it with everyone? And I don't believe that no one has any problems with Microsoft 365. We have a question. Go ahead, Mike.
I have something that I just recently learned, and that is that there are 2 very different connectors for connecting Excel to SharePoint list data built into Excel. There is one that is under online services and another one that is under other sources. And they both say connect to SharePoint, but they are actually 2 different connectors. And then if you use the one under other connections, it actually retrieves significantly more columns from the SharePoint list. And that one is also designed to work with on-prem, where the other one does not work with on-prem. But the on-prem one does work with SharePoint Online. So really fascinating, but nerdy, super granular difference there. So I learned that this week.
I was not aware of that either.
Very helpful.
Does anyone know of any connectors that, so something that I'm struggling with is like our Salesforce instance, we are not able to export any reporting information, to any format. So Yeah, it's a long story. And it happened before I even joined this company, but there's no ability to export your reports. So you could subscribe and copy and paste whatever into Excel, whatever you want to do. However, are there any like custom connectors that can take information or scrape it from a report and put it into a SharePoint list?
Yes.
Yes.
So, well.
And probably beyond my comprehension level at this point of how to use it, but I'm just curious if it's there to maybe get there
So
someday.
before I answer that question, let's just backtrack a minute. So why can't you export, like, is it locked down by choice or is it?
It's locked down by the corporate choice, yes.
So even if the export features are locked down, a lot of times the APIs are still available.
Okay.
And if you do have access to access the APIs, you might be able to do like a REST connection or an OData connection from, say, Power BI and get the raw data sets. And then from there, put it into Excel or, Power Automate, whatever you need to do. If not, another design pattern would be to build like a data warehouse or a data lake where you could use, say, Azure Data Factory to connect to those APIs, extract it, put it into a SQL table. And then from there, you can do whatever you need to do with it.
Okay, all right, so there's options.
But to answer your question about like,
Short answer is yes. But
Yeah, but like, let's say you have like an Excel file or a table in a PDF that you need to do something with, right, or a screenshot. So Microsoft has a few solutions around that. So one of it is within SharePoint or Microsoft Syntax, where you can have form recognition, where you can actually take that and extract that information out.
Yep.
The other related product is AI Builder.
AI Builder, yeah.
Which next month you'll.
Yeah, no, I actually had started to use that. I did a lot in like a development environment to build a solution for another department, only to find out like, we don't really have it as our standard license that we have access to anyway, so I couldn't even utilize.
You have to pay for the credits.
Yeah.
The other thing that you could also consider, there's also the Power Automate,
Desktop.
the desktop
Yeah,
RPA,
you can do
Okay.
web scraping.
where you can do pretty significant web scraping. If you go on our YouTube channel, I did a full demo of how that works about a year ago.
Okay.
But you're able to basically log in as yourself and you just like record your mouse moves and
It
it'll
captures.
just, yeah.
Okay, I'll give that a shot. Yeah, I do have that installed, and I think I was working on it with something else just to play around because I'm really just getting into all these tools and whatnot. So
These are all like really backwards ways. If you could do the API way, that's like.
yeah,
that's
right,
by
right,
far.
right. I have a feeling I'm not going to be able to do that, and I will be doing my own little workaround and scraping. Is probably what's going to happen. That's usually how I get to most of my things that I need. So we'll see. But good to know there are options. So cool.
Absolutely. All right. Has anyone else run into any problems recently or solved any difficult problems? All right.
Might be somebody in the chat.
Someone in the chat, Dimitri?
Yeah, I've got that open. I think there was some just feedback or questions for Rachel presentation.
Okay.
All right, let's move forward. So again, huge thanks to LMS 365 for sponsoring our session today. And moving forward, we would like to thank all of our past sponsors as well.
Thanks for the grub.
It's been, what, 9+ years since we started this user group?
Been 9 years?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
2014 in May. That was before we absorbed the Boston SharePoint user group and all that good stuff. But we've had a lot of companies. Some of them are no longer in existence. So we could probably.
Some of the sponsors.
But that being said, I mean, besides like the food at the events, there's also legal overhead fees. Meetups no longer free. There's a whole bunch of other small things that come together. So that being said, we're going to stop the recording now, just so we could talk about something a little bit more sensitive in terms of if anyone is hiring or looking for work.